Singing Russian reggae to a Norwegian nightclub. Musicians trying to drown out the hostility of their capitals. Norway's government saying very little, only that it wants to see Frode Berg back home. So Anita is waiting and worrying.
The government should do everything they can, and they should do it fast.
Her greatest hope is that Russia's president will pardon her husband. But she knows in this climate, doing political deals won't be easy. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Kirkenes.
More on all our top stories on the website, bbc.com/news, including the latest on the US House condemning President Trump's tweets as racist. We've got analysis there for you and background too. Don't forget, you can reach me on Twitter at any time. I'm at Lucy Hawkins, BBC. Bye-bye.
Hello there. Severe thunderstorms are likely to affect parts of Greece overnight and into Wednesday as well. These are those storms on the satellite picture. This clump of cloud is the same system actually responsible for torrential downpours in Corsica on Monday, and even a report of a very powerful looking water spout as well. So those storms continue to affect parts of Greece and increasingly will move into western parts of Turkey. The main threat from the storms, flash flooding, could get some hail and some damaging gusts of wind as well. So the weather looks very unsettled here. Moving away from the Greece area and Turkey, we're looking at dry weather for Italy with increasingly sunny weather here. Plenty of sunshine too for Spain and Portugal. 24 degrees in Lisbon, a 34 in Madrid, so some fairly warm sunshine here. Temperatures of 29 or so forecast high in Paris, so things are getting warmer. But in contrast to that, across northeastern parts of Europe, it stays quite unsettled. Low pressure still with us. There will still be some rain around. That rain affecting Moscow, and temperatures here 21 degrees, so not the hottest of July days. Here's the outlook then for the next few days. We'll look at Paris. Temperatures are forecast to rise further. We're up to 32 degrees Celsius early next week. Temperatures in the London area generally running into the mid-20s. We could see one or two passing storms, but the weather predominantly dry. In Moscow, meanwhile, it stays unsettled. Quite cool for the next few days. Temperatures picking up early next week.
They have survived for hundreds of thousands of years. Komodo dragons, saliva dripping with dangerous venom, live here on just a handful of small islands in Indonesia. Arriving at Komodo Island, lizards, the only place you'll find these dragons anywhere in the world. The villagers that live with the dragons believe they're spiritually and physically related to them.
Soalnya kembar tadi ada hubung darah, hubung antara batin manusia dan binatang komodonya.
But this human-dragon relationship may be all about to change. An increasing number of tourists are now flocking here to see this iconic species.
Welcome.
And this man, the powerful governor of the region, now wants to close Komodo Island to mass tourism and expel the villagers, making the island a home only for the dragons.
Di sana itu tidak ada human right, yang ada animal right. Jadi kalau tidak animal right, ya, yang dilindungi itu komodo. Yang di sana kan tidak manusia tidak dilindungi.
In a world of complex global news stories, we'll sift through the information to bring you what matters most. And with reaction and reporting in real time,
our immigration laws are a laughingstock all over the world.
You'll know what's happening around the world as we do.
And that these new measures won't actually stop Venezuelans coming over, it will just make the migrant crisis worse.
Whatever the story, we'll piece it together. Join me, Ros Atkins, for Outside Source on BBC World News.
This is BBC World News, the headlines. The US House of Representatives has condemned as racist recent comments by President Trump in which he criticised a group of non-white Democratic Party congresswomen. He urged the women to go back to where they came from. Sudan's military leaders have signed a power-sharing deal with the opposition. The agreement follows months of protests and the ousting of the president, Omar al-Bashir. It's hoped there will be elections within 3 years. 4 of Myanmar's top generals have been banned from entering the US over the treatment of Myanmar's Rohingya minority group. These sanctions announced by the US State Department will also apply to the military leaders' families. The British-Iranian woman jailed by Iran for alleged spying has been moved to a psychiatric ward, according to her husband. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe recently went on hunger strike for 15 days. Her husband fears she's been pressurised to sign denouncements.
Now on BBC World News, your daily briefing on business and economics from the world's financial centres. From New York, World Business Report.
France Renews calls for the biggest economies to work together on taxing the tech giants as G7 finance ministers meet near Paris. Turning waste into food. We'll find out how one Singapore company is using insects to help the environment and cut down on rubbish. Hello and a warm welcome to World Business Report. I'm Susanna Streeter. The French finance minister is urging a group of the world's largest economies to work together on taxing the big tech giants. Bruno Le Maire is hosting G7 finance ministers near Paris amid a growing row that's already caused the United States to threaten tariffs against France. Last week, President Macron's government became the first in the world to pass a tax on their revenues. The biggest such as Google, Amazon and Facebook and Apple will have to pay 3% on some of their sales in France if they have global sales of over $840 million. Well, across the channel, the UK also says it's planning to press ahead with a 2% tax on sales from April. But both countries have said they'll ditch their taxes if an international agreement can be reached. As you can see here, corporation tax rates vary widely right across the G7. The aim of an agreement would be to get more tax out of the companies who route their profits through low-tax countries so that they pay less than they otherwise would. Now, some of the fiercest opposition is coming from the United States, where Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said he was concerned that the French measure unfairly targets American companies and opened an investigation that could lead to retaliatory tariffs. And in the last hour, the French finance minister speaking at that G7 meeting said he hoped a compromise could be reached with the US. But France introduced its tax because the time for talking was over.
The lack of leadership in Europe leads directly to nationalism and populism. So we are fully determined with Emmanuel Macron to move on, to open a way, to open a road to a fair taxation. We have to build the taxation of the 21st century. We have new economic models. We cannot rely only on the taxation model of the 20th century. We need to build the taxation system of the 21st century.
So with me now is Simon Halberstam, who's a partner and the head of technology law at Simons Muirhead. Hello there. So first of all, let's talk about what Bruno Le Maire has just said. He said the time for talking is over. We need action now. If France takes action, as it has, do you think that others will follow?
The problem is we don't have any global coordinated response. Different countries have different interests. Low-tax jurisdictions such as Ireland and Luxembourg have no interest whatsoever in pursuing measures against the United States or theoretically against big companies with those sort of revenues worldwide and locally in their particular jurisdictions. So I think it's very difficult to see that there's going to be any concerted effort. France is obviously trying to light the touch paper for some sort of global reform, which may eventually come through the OECD, but at the moment it's difficult to see it coming.
Do you think it's because other countries are concerned about repercussions from the United States?
Certainly the rumours are that Germany has stayed well clear of this, doesn't want to engage the US, which probably means the G7 discussions this week will ultimately go go nowhere, because Germany has a different perspective on this from France. To some extent, it's seen that President Macron is trying to appease the Gilets jaunes because of all the elitist scandal, if you like, that surrounded him in relation to the recent riots and demonstrations. So whether this is political posturing or actually economically serious is to be seen.
When you say political posturing, the thing is, many people in lots of different countries around the world really do want to see some kind of tax. They say it's unfair that people who purchase the products have to pay VAT, but in fact the tech giants don't have to pay the taxes that they believe are due. Is it really political posturing, or is it giving the electorate what they want?
Well, a mixture of the two, I suppose. I mean, in the UK, are we going to take it any further? We've announced that we're going to introduce a 2% tax from next year, similar to the French initiative, the French law, but difficult to see how it's going to work because America and the UK are going to be locked in post-Brexit deal talks. America's already saying that if this goes through in the UK, this is going to affect the prospect of a good deal. There's what they call the Section 301 investigation that's been launched by the US, which is usually a sort of a forerunner to them imposing punitive tariffs on other countries. So the US has all the cards, really.
OK, Simon Halberson, many thanks for that. We'll have to wait and see what happens after that G7 Summit of Finance Ministers. Certainly Bruno Le Maire wants to see something happen. We'll have to watch closely. Now, cutting waste is a problem businesses across the planet are trying to get to grips with. It's particularly acute in the food industry. Companies want to reduce their environmental impact and cut their carbon footprint. And that's led to some rather innovative solutions. In Singapore, one microbrewery is teaming up with a local startup which uses a local insect that's ready to do battle for the environment. Monica Miller sent this report looking at the future of food.
The recipe used to make the perfect beer is a mix of science and art. The brewmaster of one of Singapore's first micro-distilleries spends hours mixing malt, hops, yeast and water. The final products include about 500 kilos of spent grains left over from the brewing process.
In the earlier years, we would just throw it away. We had to pay to throw it away. That's the best part.
But one person's trash is another person's treasure. About a year ago, a local startup called Insecta said that they would take it off their hands to feed a local species.
I was like, huh? What is that? You're rearing black soldier flies? And they're like, yeah.
They take roughly 1 metric ton of leftover beer mash to a vertical insect farm in the center of the tiny island city. Insecta uses the black soldier fly larvae to feed fish and birds, as well as turn into natural fertilizer.
Their larvae can eat 4 times their body weight a day, and they can eat all kinds of food waste.
This is where the magic happens. After the black soldier flies become adults, they come live in here and mate, creating about 600 to 800 eggs. But they're not long for this world after that. About 5 to 7 days later, they die and they're crushed into compost.
While they may have a short lifespan, the species can potentially make a large contribution to society as an alternative to traditional animal feed like corn, soy, and fish meal, which require hundreds of acres to cultivate. Miss Tua wasn't trained in agriculture. She learned on the job and through the internet.
So a lot of things with insect farming is a lot of trial and error. It is still a very pioneering industry.
But is insect farming a fad, or is it here to stay? Some experts say we have no choice but to think outside the box.
I hope that consumers will be more willing to try out these alternative sources, because eventually we'll be running out of sort of traditional food source.
Singapore isn't the only country to receive the wake-up call to consider other practices. Black soldier fly farms can also be found in China, South Africa, and the UK. While the industry may be made up of pioneers, their work could pay off for generations to come. Monica Miller, BBC News, Singapore.
Monica Miller and the future of food. On to some other news now. And the European Union is launching an antitrust investigation into Amazon. It's over suspicions that the online retailer misuses sensitive data from independent retailers who sell on the company's site. The EU is concerned about a possible conflict because Amazon sells directly on the same website. Renault has formed a joint venture with China Xinjiang Motors to build electric cars for the Chinese market. It's one of the fastest growing in the world, with more than 1 million vehicles sold last year. Renault will take a 50% stake in the venture and says it's an important part of its plans for expansion in China. US politicians have described Facebook's plan to launch a cryptocurrency as delusional. They also questioned if the company could be trusted with people's financial data. The Senate Banking Committee was grilling the man in charge of the project about how it will work. David Marcus said Libra wouldn't be launched until regulators were happy. He's due to answer more questions from another committee today. Now, don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at Streeter News. From all of us here, goodbye.
Follow the food, in association with Corteva Agri-Science.
Biosphere 2 is an attempt of mimicking our Earth. When it was first built about 25 years ago now, what the people were trying to do was trying to understand what we now know as Earth systems. How do the various ecosystems all operate together to make an Earth that's habitable? We have a rainforest, we have an ocean, and we have a desert.
How many things are you able to change in each ecosystem?
Enormous amounts. We can change the rain pattern, the rainfall, the temperatures, the gradients in the temperatures, and we would hope that in the future people pay more attention to these sorts of large experiments.
Follow the food, in association with Corteva Agri-Science.
Talking business promo take one, market, action.
In a forward-planning, paradigm-shifting world where high-net-worth individuals leverage best business practice with binary answers, why not synergize with the Talking Business Tiger team, whose core competency is thinking outside the box and drilling down to get the answers? Well, oh, mate, it's a bit boring. It's not really me. Hey, how about this? If you want a business show that's fun, informative, and without all that jargon, then join me, Talking Business with Aaron Heselhurst, weekdays on BBC World News. There you go. Job done, right? Hey, who wants a cup of tea?
Being together and being connected to each other in everything. That's the cause, to show that we still exist.
It's incredible that we've been given a second chance to have life.
Our World is a unique series of films on the BBC, offering personal insights into global events.
How fast does a soul travel? Can I please catch up and be with him?
Our World, stories that speak for themselves.
It's 50 years since man first walked on the moon, creating some of the most memorable images of the 20th century. This dish in the Australian countryside helped to beam it to 600 million homes around the globe. To find out more, join me, Howell Griffith, here on BBC World News.
Catch up with all the latest sports news and results from around the globe. Now on BBC World News, Sport Today.
Hello there, I'm John Watson. A very warm welcome along to Sport Today. We're live from the BBC Sports Centre, and these are our headlines. The $84 million teenager Turin welcomes Matthias de Ligt to the Juventus family. Also in black and white, why not everyone in Newcastle's happy about this appointment? And stay with us as we bring you all the colour from the Netball World Cup. Yes, welcome. He's regarded as one of the brightest prospects in European football and a player that Juventus hope will help guide them to the Champions League title. Here is Ajax captain Matthias de Ligt arriving in Turin ahead of his medical with the Serie A champions. The defender, who's still only 19, led the Dutch club to the Champions League semi-finals this season. And Juve, in their pursuit of European football's biggest prize, hope he'll take them one step further to the title. He'll sign for the Italian champions for a reported $84 million. But is he worth that much? Well, he is, according to Marcel van der Kraan from De Telegraaf.
1 year ago, Mark Overmars, the technical director of Ajax and the former Ajax winger, together with Edwin van der Sar, the former United goalkeeper and now the CEO of Ajax, were absolutely convinced that 50 million euros was a big fee for Matthijs de Ligt, and they kind of agreed that if the player would go one day, that would be the fee they would ask for. But when Barcelona came knocking on the door for Frenkie de Jong in the winter, and other inflation took place in Europe for their players, they changed their views on the price for Matthijs de Ligt, and yes, it grew up to £67 million, which is an astronomical fee for a 19-year-old boy who only 2 years ago was still a junior player and has only just had one big season in Europe, and that was this season. But he's good, and I do think he's worth it if you compare it to all the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. What a season it was. No wonder that Europe's best clubs were interested in him. Tottenham, of course, beat Ajax in the Champions League semi-finals. They're about to lose defender Kieran Trippier to the Spanish side Atletico Madrid. The England right-back joined from Burnley 4 years ago. He's played more than 100 times for the club and was one of the stars of England's World Cup campaign in Russia as well, scoring in the semi-finals, but has been linked with a move away from the club. Well, someone who's settling into life in the northeast of England is manager Steve Bruce, who's been appointed as the new head coach of Newcastle United. Now, he replaces Rafa Benitez, who left at the end of last month, a manager who was hugely popular with the fans. And with frustration over the way that the club's been run, Bruce faces a big job to try and win them round. This is what he had to say after the appointment. He said, there is a huge challenge ahead of us, but it's one that my staff and I are ready for. This is my boyhood club, and it was my dad's club, so this is a very special moment for me and my family. And you'll certainly hope that those connections, of course, to the club will pay off and garner support with the fans. Clarence Seedorf has been sacked as the manager of Cameroon. The defending Africa Cup of Nations champions were knocked out of this year's tournament by Nigeria in the last 16. Seedorf had been in charge since August last year. His assistant, Patrick Kluivert, who we just saw there, also leaves. Well, Bayern Munich, another one of European football's greats. Their forward, Robert Lewandowski, says the Bundesliga club need to sign new players if they're to win the Champions League title this season. Bayern last won the competition back in 2013 and play Arsenal in the Intercontinental Champions Cup in California on Wednesday. The German club have spent significant sums strengthening their defence with the acquisitions of Atletico Madrid's Lucas Hernandez and Stuttgart's Benjamin Pavard. But Lewandowski wants more. He says more money needs to be spent, especially as replacements for the attacking trio Frank Ribery, Ian Robben and James Rodriguez haven't yet been found.
Yeah, well, we have to wait for more players to arrive because in order to win the Champions League, we need new signings. To compete at the top level against the top teams, you need certain qualities and you need a strong team to be competitive. In the last 2 years, we have not been involved in any big transfers and we need to sign new players. This is what I have to say. If we talk about the extension of my contract, I think that we are on a good path to make that happen.
Yes, you wonder if that could be a wake-up call for the club's hierarchy. We've seen it used at the World Cup and in numerous countries around the world. And in a few weeks' time, it'll be the English Premier League's turn to use video assistant referee technology for the very first time. It's intended to help referees officiate better and cut out match-changing mistakes. But it's not without its critics. Some say it creates as much confusion as clarity, and there have been fears that it could slow the game down. Premier League Interim Chief Executive Richard Masters says the time is right, though, to bring it in.
Well, VAR has obviously been around for a couple of seasons now in football generally. We didn't bring it in last year because we wanted to be absolutely ready, particularly for those packed Saturday afternoons when we have lots of Premier League fixtures. We had enough properly trained VARs ready to go. So we're ready to do it, and we think it's going to be added. We want it to be VAR to operate in a way which doesn't interrupt the flow of the game. English football is well known for its fast-paced, aggressive style of football. We don't want that to change. But we do want those big decisions to be right.
Yes, as will the fans, of course. The Netball World Cup continues in Liverpool, in the northwest of England. Jamaica's fate in the tournament is now out of their own hands. They must win both of their 2 remaining games against Scotland and Uganda with a big goal margin and hope that England or South Africa lose their remaining fixtures. We can cross now to the arena and speak to Kate Gray, our reporter. Kate, it's a big day then for Jamaica ahead, as we've just been saying.
That's right, John. I don't think Jamaica expected to find themselves in this position at this point in the tournament. They were seeded number 2 in the world. They were actually tipped to be the team to go all the way, but following some early defeats in this tournament, they lost to South Africa in the first couple of days, which meant they then faced England, and they also lost against them, which means, as you said, their fate now lies in the control of the other results. They will have to beat Scotland today